You guys get a little self-conscious when I start recording. I usually don't say anything. Very used to that stuff. All right, back to the agenda. All right, illusion, grammar, vocab. Okay, so we'll talk through chapters 1 and 2 in a sec here. And then something new, AP Classroom Unit 3. I want to watch the first 4 videos on character by tomorrow night. So there are 2 videos on skills 1A and 2 videos on skills 1B. Those are both on character and turn in notes as usual. And like I said, I already have that post up. So there are 4 of them, so don't wait forever to start that. That will set us up well to start Hamlet, and we can think hard about Hamlet and maybe some others. Nature of their characters, purpose, where they come from, what their motivations are, what they're like from the get-go there. So kind of shifting gears here, right? Starting reading a drama. It's not a short story, it's not a novel, and although it's not a poem, it's written in poetry. I found out last bell and recalled that actually a lot of you guys read Macbeth when you're sophomores, so you probably remember from that and Romeo and Juliet when you're ninth graders, of course, that all of Shakespeare's plays, all 37 of his plays are written in iambic pentameter. Everybody wrote in iambic pentameter for such a long time. It wasn't until a little while after Shakespeare that finally people realized, hey, we can just write how people talk. Imagine that. But it's kind of a leftover from like the ancient epics of various countries, certainly Greece, in which there wasn't writing originally, and the stories were passed down from generation to generation just by being spoken, right, without being written down. And you can't really memorize the then equivalent of a novel, right? So the rhyme and rhythm of the way the story was told was able to be remembered by the speaker because it was written in poetry. Couldn't really do that otherwise. Okay, let me switch over to the illusion for today. And it is Pavlov. Pavlov's dogs, or Pavlovian. Anybody know anything about that? I talked with last bell about it. Doesn't seem like they have studied it yet. Yeah, that's not possible, Emily. You had a, what's the word? I'll think of it in a minute. Hamlet as a rock opera on YouTube, and it's not horrible. Wow, Molly, I would like to check that out. That sounds like a great idea to me. Huh. Is it British? She's chatting, I'm speaking. Come back to that. Anybody know anything about Pavlov, who Pavlov was, what his dogs were, what Pavlovian means?
He trained dogs to have like essentially immediate responses to, I'm pretty sure, a bell.
Yep. Yeah. The term is a conditioned response.
Yeah, so conditioned. I forgot the term for it, but yeah.
Yep, that's it. So early 20th century, he's a Russian scientist best known for his research on what came to be called conditioned response. So he rang a bell while presenting food to dogs, and seeing the food, when he rang the bell, the dogs would automatically begin to salivate because they had been conditioned to associate the bell with food. I bet right around 8:45, 9 o'clock, if someone came and knocked on this door and it wasn't the breakfast lady, you would begin to salivate anyway. Those of you who are here, it's almost Pavlovian, isn't it? And certainly when bells ring in the school, even if it's not at the right time, your body reflexively jumps up because I got to gather my stuff and go somewhere, right? That's kind of Pavlovian. So it's a phrase that refers to someone who automatically or instinctively responds to, I would say reflexively, maybe even, or obeys a signal. So the adjective Pavlovian refers to such an automatic, unthinking response. Give you a minute to get that down. Let's talk with my cohort in second bell, I think, about how, just as a side note, that CPS, which is Cincinnati Public Schools, if you don't know, just went to remote for, I guess it's, let me think, is Thanksgiving next week? We have another full week next week, okay. Yeah, after the next full week, I think even including the Monday and Tuesday before, they're going full remote through Christmas. So as of now, we're doing 2 days of remote right after Thanksgiving. You guys know about that, right? Did you guys know that? Monday and Tuesday after Thanksgiving, full remote. But,
I did not
yeah.
know that.
What's that?
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah, we are. Everybody will be home. No cohorts for Monday and Tuesday after Thanksgiving. I think the idea is then after the inevitable family gathering spreads that happen, that anybody who's going to get symptoms will get them in time to realize that they shouldn't come back to school. So probably not a bad idea. All right, a couple examples here. Last slide. When the bell rang, the students, like Pavlov's dogs, began packing up their books as if the class was over, even though the class had only been in progress for 10 minutes, just like I was saying. Or you might head to the refrigerator the minute a TV commercial comes on. It's kind of a dated example, but you get the idea. While you're finishing that up, if you could grab your Perrine books and turn to page 1036. Talk a little bit about the nature of drama. And access your responses to the questions so we can actually talk and participate. Okay, so in chapter 1, we're just kind of talking about the nature of drama itself and how it's kind of a unique genre, unique medium, right? What are the 3 unique qualities in general that the basics that we start with in contrast to other literature to be read? Someone review that for us. Unmute. Overall, it's written for the purpose of what? Not being read, but being what?
Acted before an audience on a stage.
Right, through actors on a stage before an audience. In other words, is performed, right? And that makes the study of literature in an English class a little bit challenging, right? Because we're neither necessarily seeing or hearing it. Now, the way we'll do it is I will give you links that the audio recording production of Hamlet that I usually use in class. Someone has it linked up on YouTube, and so you can listen to it on there while you read from the book. To make it a little bit easier, I'm also going to introduce you to, and you might have seen before, something called No Fear Shakespeare. It's usually used for weaker students than yourselves, but you guys can look at anything. I mean, I can't control that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at a modern translation, especially when needed. So although I want you to use the book and really concentrate on being able to interpret and read Shakespeare's verse, and it is kind of annotated. The book has, you know, some antiquated individual words. There's notes on them to let you know what's going on and stuff. But you can feel free to look on the No Fear Shakespeare site and read a modernized version of any dialogue that you want to kind of just get yourself unlost, for lack of a better term. Okay. Number 2 is explore the advantages and disadvantages of having actors as a medium for the presentation of a dramatic experience. What's hard about it? What's easy about it? What's good about it? What's challenging about it? Anybody address number 2?
Some advantages that you can have an actor is they can actually, the audience can actually hear like what they're saying. So then if the actor is really good and their facial expression, gestures, and speech rhythm can make the what's it called, the play more better.
Yeah, more convincing. It certainly can be much more convincing, and that has to do with the director too, right? Like how good of a production, how good of an interpretation emotionally is being presented. the way that the director is directing the actors. But yeah, if you have good actors and it's a good production, there's nothing more thrilling to me, especially than really seeing, like, anybody ever go to the Playhouse and like see a play, like in the Playhouse? Have you been there? Yeah. It's pretty crazy if you haven't done it in a long time, or maybe you've never done it. I'm sure you've seen school plays and things like that once in a while, but to see like a real professional company, you know, or to go see, you know, the Shakespeare Company, like, has anybody ever done that? Like downtown? No? That's amazing. You know, there's no retakes, there's no multiple takes, there's no do-overs, there's no rewinding, there's no pausing, it's just happening, right? Much like a musical performance, right? What about point of view? Kind of addressing numbers 2 and 3 here. By nature of the genre, what is the production of it? What is limited as far as literary techniques? What are you limited to? Only one choice of when you're doing a play. Which point of view? I'll just go and say that. Can't really do omniscient, right? Can't really do first person. Can't really do limited third person because you don't really have a narrator in general, right? That's what a play is missing. So what's left? It's a special, much less used one that all plays are by their very nature.
What was it? Objective, or
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact term. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes called dramatic point of view because you're seeing it, right? It's not like there's a narrator that's painting the scene for you. It's painted on a set, right? You see it, you hear it, it is what it is. And so that's there. Now, once in a while, you might have, you know, the next chapter talks a little bit about things like a chorus or a narrator they're used in some plays, but traditionally that's not part of the play, right? Now, part of the ways that that's made up for, since you don't have a narrator, are these two devices that are introduced in this chapter and then discussed in more depth in the next chapter: the soliloquy and the aside, right? Can someone tell us what those things are?
It's when like he's speaking, but then he turns away from who he's speaking to, and like says his thoughts.
Okay, which that's a little bit of both. It sounds like you're probably speaking of asides. And it can either be a secret that a character is only saying to oneself, which is almost kind of like a mini tiny little soliloquy, or it could be a secret being told to another character that we understand is not being heard by the rest of the characters on the stage, even though we hear it in the audience, which makes it not realistic, right? Not unrealistic, but non-realistic is the term. It's talked about in chapter 2. And we just have to take for granted and accept that those things that are used are not things that happen in real life, right? Like you are not, in general, going to speak out loud by yourself when no one else is around about what's going on in your head and your heart, which is what a soliloquy is, right? And you've seen those in Macbeth, right? If you read Macbeth, there are certain times when Macbeth is just by himself and just tells you everything that's going on, which is usually how crazy he's going, right? Or how depressed he is about what he's done and what's going on and what's happened to all the stuff that he was going to do. Okay. Then there's the stuff about the audience, and just to kind of paraphrase there, you know, that's part of the power of a play that, again, we miss out on by only reading it, even if we have audio, because even like a sporting event or something, it becomes more exciting because you feel and you hear the audience kind of reacting together, at least to some degree, with a play. And we don't have that when we study it, okay? But we try to get there. I try to get close to that a little bit by studying the poetry and by using audio with it. Let's talk a little bit about chapter 2. We'll hold off on 3 until tomorrow. So chapter 2 is on page 1087, and here bringing up these terms realistic and non-realistic drama. So the concept here that we want to really understand is the difference between, like the first question asks, what's the difference between non-realistic and unrealistic? Anybody kind of got a hold of that, can explain it to us? They're both not realistic, but what's unrealistic in contrast to non-realistic?
Non-realistic is like things of the supernatural or like things that are impossible, or unrealistic are like more attributed to like a character's outlook, where like the way they view the world is unrealistic, or it's more of like an intangible method of being like not realistic.
Kind of bouncing around there. I think I'm following you. Let's try to apply it a little bit more specifically to like literature itself, okay? We consider things like soliloquies and asides to be non-realistic conventions. Okay, they are not realistic, but they're not mistakes that make us think to ourselves, oh, that's unrealistic, that's silly, right? So unrealistic might be a critical term that we might apply to a short story that's commercial fiction, that's kind of shallow, that's not really presenting like a true life experience. Oh, that's a corny twist at the end. Things rarely happen that way. What does that mean? That's unrealistic, right? But non-realistic, and somebody does a soliloquy, okay, that's non-realistic, but we accept it because it's being done purposefully to try to enrich the story. Okay, so it's weird terminology, but that's what that means.
I
there's
mean, okay. What I
Go ahead.
took from that was that non-reality is just like non-realistic things is generally in how the play is presented or how something's presented, while unrealistic things are in how the play is played out, like how the actions happen.
Yeah, especially if they don't feel real and not on purpose, right? So it basically means like non-realistic is on purpose, right? And unrealistic is maybe not as much on purpose. So non-realistic is, we think is okay because we accept it. All right. So some other things, we do sometimes have something that's called a chorus, or maybe even sometimes a narrator. And it mentions the Glass Menagerie, right? Is something that actually has a narrator, and that's kind of an experimental way of doing the play, and it makes it feel a little bit more like a novel. The concept of a chorus goes back to ancient Greek drama. We're not actually going to read Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. Is kind of one of the most famous examples of like ancient Greek drama, and it does inform Shakespeare and how it works. But we'll probably talk about it a little bit. So what a chorus was, and Shakespeare even still uses this. He certainly used it in the first two acts of Romeo and Juliet when he kind of introduces the scene. Those lines of like a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose pities overthrows with their death, bury their parents' strife. That whole thing at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. That's not a character speaking. That's the chorus. Okay, so back in ancient Greek drama, you would have like a group of people that would like dance back and forth on the stage and kind of introduce the story, like totally non-realistic, right? But that was accepted, and it just kind of helped set the scene and tell the story since you don't have a narrator. Shakespeare uses that a little bit with his chorus that comes out and basically speaks in what becomes a sonnet, but only the first two acts. And that has mostly disappeared. We don't really have choruses in like modern drama or anything like that. Okay, those are the main concepts there. We didn't cover all of the questions specifically, but I'm not going to hold you any longer. We'll talk about tragedy and comedy more tomorrow, kind of some more advanced concepts in there and different variations. So get going on those videos, finish your vocab tonight, grammar tomorrow night, and I think that's it. Hopefully we'll hit Hamlet by the end of the week. See ya.